They underestimated humanity, and the Council has lived to regret it. The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal, its walls displaying the swirling nebulae of 1,000 conquered worlds. Supreme Chancellor's 4 arms gestured dismissively as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the Outer Rim territories. Her species, had dominated galactic politics for over 2, and nothing in these reports suggested that would change anytime soon. Another primitive species discovered in the Sol system, announced Commander, his features clicking with what passed for amusement among his kind. Carbon-based bipeds calling themselves humans. Standard technological development barely achieved faster-than-light travel. Estimated threat level, negligible. The assembled representatives from 47 species murmured their agreement. They had seen this pattern countless times before. A young species would stumble into space, make contact with the Council's scout ships, and within a standard cycle would be either integrated as a minor member state or classified as a protected primitive culture. The humans would be no different. His primary eyes focused on the holographic display showing Earth's blue marble surface. Population: approximately 8 billion, highly fragmented into competing nation-states. They've recently emerged from what they call a world war and appear to be in a period of technological acceleration. Weapons capabilities: primitive kinetic projectiles, chemical explosives, and crude nuclear fission devices. Nothing that could threaten even our oldest scout vessels. The Chancellor's secondary arms waved in the traditional gesture of dismissal. Standard first contact protocol: send Ambassador Aura with a light escort, offer them junior membership status. If they refuse, we'll revisit the classification in 50 cycles. What the Council failed to understand was that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology. It was their capacity for adaptation, their refusal to accept limitations, and most dangerously of all, their ability to learn from their enemies. Ambassador Aura arrived in the Sol system 3 weeks later aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge. The ship was a standard Council design, built more for intimidation than combat, its kilometer-long hull gleaming with the authority of galactic civilization. The humans' first response was not what they expected. Instead of the usual mixture of awe and fear that greeted most first contacts, human vessels immediately began broadcasting mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and what appeared to be deliberately constructed universal greeting protocols. They had been preparing for this moment. Fascinating, Aura murmured to her aide as they monitored human communications. They've given considerable thought to first contact scenarios. The initial meeting took place aboard a human space station they called the International Space Station. It was a crude construction by Council standards, held together with primitive metal alloys and what appeared to be hope. But when Ambassador Aura materialized in the main module, she found herself facing not cowering primitives, but a carefully selected team of humans who had obviously studied every aspect of xenobiology they could imagine. Secretary General stepped forward, her movements confident despite being in the presence of a 3-meter-tall alien with crystalline skin and eyes like liquid mercury. Ambassador Aura, welcome to our system. We are honored by your presence and eager to learn about the greater galactic community. The diplomat's surprise was carefully hidden behind of training, but she noted the humans' prepared response, the way the others in the room maintained alert but respectful positions, and most tellingly, the small devices they carried that were obviously recording everything. Secretary General, I bring greetings from the Galactic Council. Your species has achieved faster-than-light travel, which qualifies you for contact and potential membership in our civilization. What followed was not the typical first contact scenario the Council had experienced over 1,000 times before. Instead of immediately accepting the offer or cowering before superior technology, the humans asked questions. Detailed questions. About Council structure, about the rights and obligations of member species, about historical precedents, about everything. How many species currently hold full voting rights? Asked. 12, Aura replied, slightly puzzled by the question. And how many are classified as junior members? Currently 35. What determines the transition from junior to full membership? Aura hesitated. In truth, no species had made that transition in over 800 cycles. The 12 senior members maintained their positions through a complex web of technological superiority, economic control, and carefully managed dependencies. But the truth was not something typically shared during first contact. A complex evaluation process based on technological advancement, political stability, and cultural compatibility. Dr. James, the human, leaned forward. Could you provide us with specific examples of species that have successfully made this transition? The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Ara realized with growing unease that these humans were not asking casual questions born of curiosity. They were conducting an interrogation, and they were very good at it. That information would be made available upon your acceptance of junior membership status. The humans exchanged glances and nodded slightly. We appreciate the offer, Ambassador. We would like to request a period of consideration before providing our response. Of course, standard protocol allows for 30 local days for decision. We would prefer 90 days. Another surprise, most species either accepted immediately or rejected the offer outright. None had ever requested an extended deliberation period. That is unusual but acceptable. What the Council didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades. Since their first radio telescopes had detected evidence of artificial signals from space, human scientists, military strategists, philosophers, and politicians had been developing contingency plans for first contact scenarios. They had wargamed every possible approach, from benevolent space brothers to hostile invasion forces. The 90-day period that followed was unlike anything in Council history. Instead of waiting passively for humanity's decision, the humans became actively involved in gathering intelligence about their potential new overlords. Human mathematicians cracked the basic principles behind Council faster-than-light communication within weeks. Human engineers reverse-engineered fundamental concepts from their brief examinations of Council technology. Most importantly, human intelligence agencies began the largest information-gathering operation in their species' history. They discovered that the Galactic Council was not the benevolent federation it presented itself as. Junior member species were essentially resource colonies, their development carefully managed to ensure they never posed a threat to the senior members' dominance. The few species that had attempted to develop independently had been subjected to economic sanctions, technological embargoes, or in extreme cases, pacification missions that left there in ruins. Humanity's response, when it came, was delivered simultaneously to every Council member species through their own communication networks. The humans had somehow penetrated Council information systems and broadcast their message directly to the populations of 47 different worlds. Citizens of the galaxy, Secretary General began, her image appearing on screens across known space. We have been offered membership in your Council. But before we accept, we believe you should know what we have learned about the organization that claims to represent galactic civilization. What followed was a detailed presentation of the Council's true nature, complete with economic data, historical records of subjugated species, and evidence of technological suppression. But more than just it was a declaration. We reject the Council's offer of junior membership. We will not become another resource colony for the senior members to exploit. Instead, we offer an alternative to every species currently under Council control: true independence, genuine technological exchange, and mutual defense against anyone who would impose their will upon free peoples. Chancellor watched the broadcast from her private chambers, her 4 arms trembling with rage. How did they penetrate our networks? Our security systems are based on quantum encryption that should be impossible for a precontact species to crack. Her intelligence chief, a nervous named, chittered anxiously. Unknown, Supreme Chancellor, but the damage is already spreading. We're receiving reports of unrest on junior member worlds throughout the galaxy. Send a battle fleet to Earth immediately. These humans will learn the price of defying the Council. But when Admiral's fleet arrived in the Sol system 2 weeks later, they found something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans had not only prepared defenses, but had somehow managed to outfit their primitive vessels with technology that should have taken them centuries to develop. Human fighters danced through space on impossibly efficient engines, their weapons systems penetrating Council shields with surgical precision. Worse, the humans fought with a coordination and tactical flexibility that the rigid, hierarchical council military had never encountered. "How are they doing this?" Admiral demanded as his flagship shuddered under human weapons fire. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, her voice filled with disbelief, "they appear to have integrated captured council technology with their own innovations. But the combination shouldn't be possible. Our systems are bio-coded to prevent exactly this kind of reverse engineering." The battle was a disaster for the council, not because the humans were overwhelmingly superior, but because they were learning and adapting in real time. Every tactic the council forces employed was countered within hours. Every weapon system was analyzed and defeated. By the end of the engagement, half the council fleet had been destroyed or captured, and the remainder limped home in defeat. But the real shock came 3 days later, when human vessels appeared in orbit around New Geneva, the council's capital world. Not to attack, but to broadcast another message. "Citizens of the Galactic Council," came the voice of Admiral Sarah, humanity's first space fleet commander. "Your military leaders tried to punish us for speaking truth. This is the result. We do not come as conquerors, but as liberators. Any species that wishes to withdraw from council control and join our alliance will have our protection. Any species that chooses to maintain the current system will be left alone, as long as they do not threaten those who choose freedom." The message was followed by detailed technical specifications for faster-than-light travel, advanced materials science, medical technology, and defensive systems. Everything was freely shared, with no strings attached. Within a month, 15 junior member species had withdrawn from the Council and declared independence. 3 more senior species voted to abandon their privileged positions and join what was becoming known as the Human Alliance. The carefully constructed hierarchy that had maintained galactic order for 2 was crumbling. Chancellor called an emergency session of the remaining council members. The Great Chamber, once filled with the representatives of 47 species, now housed barely 20. The humans had not conquered the galaxy through force of arms, but through something far more dangerous. They had given people hope. "We underestimated them," she admitted to the assembled leaders. "We assumed they were like every other primitive species we've encountered, but they're not. They adapt faster than should be possible. They innovate beyond all reasonable projections, and most dangerously, they refuse to accept that the current order is permanent." Supreme Admiral, his massive frame still bearing scars from the Sol system engagement, slammed one of his primary appendages on the council table. "Then we destroy them. Completely. No more half measures. Deploy the planet killers. And make them martyrs." Primary eyes fixed on the military commander. "They've already proven they can penetrate our most secure communication networks. Do you think they haven't prepared for exactly that response?" The truth was becoming clear to all of them. Humanity had not just rejected council authority. They had broken the fundamental assumption upon which that authority was based. For thousands of cycles, the senior species had maintained control through the simple belief that their technological and cultural superiority was unassailable. The humans had proved that assumption wrong. "What do you propose?" asked Representative, her translator device making her rapid clicking sounds comprehensible to the mixed assembly. "We adapt," said simply. "We learn from them just as they learned from us. The old order is finished. The question now is whether we can find a place in whatever comes next." In the Human Command Center on Luna, Secretary General reviewed the intelligence reports streaming in from across the galaxy. The Council's authority was collapsing faster than anyone had projected. Species that had been subjugated for centuries were asserting their independence. New alliances were forming. The galaxy was transforming itself. "Ma'am," her aide reported, "we're receiving communication requests from 12 more species. They want to join the alliance." Nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. And the Council's response? "Mixed. Some are calling for total war, but intelligence suggests that moderate factions are gaining influence. They might be willing to negotiate." "Good, because despite what they might think, we never wanted to destroy them. We just wanted them to understand that cooperation works better than domination." She looked out through the observation window at Earth, visible as a blue crescent against the star field. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe, and in doing so had changed that universe forever. They had faced a choice between submission and resistance, and had chosen a third option, transformation. The Galactic Council had ruled for 2 through the assumption that might made right. that technological superiority granted moral authority. Humanity had proven that assumption wrong not through superior firepower, but through superior ideas. They had offered freedom instead of subjugation, cooperation instead of domination, hope instead of resignation. As reports continued to stream in from across the galaxy, one thing became clear. The humans had not conquered their enemies. They had converted them. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying weapon of all. They underestimated humanity, and the Council has lived to regret it. 6 months after humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council, the balance of power across known space had shifted so dramatically that even the most conservative political analysts were calling it a revolution. What had started as a simple first contact scenario had become the collapse of a 2,000-year-old galactic order. Doctor stood in the newly constructed Human Alliance headquarters on Ceres, watching through massive transparent aluminum windows as ships from dozens of different species docked at the expanding station complex. Each vessel represented a world that had chosen freedom over the Council's structured hierarchy. Some were sleek designs from technologically advanced species. Others were crude conversions from former mining vessels, hastily retrofitted for interstellar travel by species that had been such technology for generations. "The delegation has arrived," announced Commander, her uniform bearing the new insignia of the Alliance fleet. "They're requesting immediate asylum status for their entire home system." Turned from the window, her mind racing through the implications. They had been one of the Council's most loyal junior members for over 4 centuries. They provided rare minerals essential to faster-than-light drive construction. If they were defecting, it would cripple the Council's ability to maintain their remaining fleets. "What's their situation?" "Council enforcement ships are already moving toward their system. The government voted unanimously to withdraw from the Council 3 days ago. They're requesting Alliance protection." This was the challenge humanity had never anticipated when they first rejected the Council's offer. They had expected to fight for their own independence, possibly aid a few like-minded species, but they had never imagined becoming the nucleus for a galaxy-wide liberation movement. Every day brought new requests for protection, new species seeking to join the Alliance, new refugees fleeing Council retaliation. "Deploy the 3rd Fleet to the system," decided, "and send Ambassador Williams with them. If we're going to do this, we need to make it clear that we're not just another conquering power. We're offering genuine partnership." The irony was not lost on her. 6 months ago, humanity had been a single-planet species, barely capable of crude interstellar travel. Now they were coordinating the defense of dozens of star systems against what had once been the most powerful military force in the galaxy. The transformation had been possible only because of humanity's greatest strength, their ability to learn and adapt faster than any species the galaxy had ever seen. While the Council had remained locked in the same technological and tactical patterns humans absorbed new information, modified it, improved it, and shared it freely with their allies. In her private office, reviewed the latest intelligence reports from deep inside Council space. The news was both encouraging and troubling. The moderate faction, led by Chancellor, was gaining influence among the remaining Council members, but the commanded by Supreme Admiral were pushing for increasingly desperate measures. "Ma'am," her aide interrupted, "we have an encrypted transmission from an unknown source inside Council space." The hologram that materialized above her desk was heavily obscured, but the voice was clearly, "Secretary General, I am Chancellor. I request a private communication to discuss terms for ending this conflict." Studied the distorted image. The most powerful being in what remained of the Galactic Council was reaching out directly, bypassing all diplomatic protocols. This was either a genuine attempt at negotiation or an elaborate trap. "Channel secured. You may speak freely, Chancellor." The hologram stabilized, revealing crystalline features. Even through the transmission, could see the exhaustion in those alien eyes. "Your species has accomplished something I believed impossible. You have convinced half the galaxy that the order we built was wrong." "We didn't convince them of anything they didn't already know. We just gave them hope that things could change." Hope repeated, the word sounding strange in her translator's rendering. "A dangerous concept. It leads to chaos, to the breakdown of order. Or to freedom, to growth, to something better than what came before." The Chancellor's four arms moved in what had learned was a gesture of frustration among her species. They want to deploy the planet killers. They believe that if we destroy Earth and a few of your closest allies, the rebellion will collapse. And you? I believe that would only prove your point about us. We built the Council to bring order to chaos, to prevent the wars that consumed the galaxy before our dominion. But perhaps we became the very thing we sought to prevent. Leaned forward, this was the opening she had been hopping for since the conflict began. What are you proposing? A new structure, not the Council's hierarchy, but not your alliances. What do you call it? Democracy? Something that preserves stability while allowing for the freedom your people seem to value so highly. Before could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Commander's voice echoed through the communication system. All hands to battle stations. Council battle fleet detected approaching the system. Massive force. This is not a drill. The hologram flickered as expression changed to one of alarm. That's not my order. Must have launched without authorization. How long do we have? The planet killer is with his fleet. If he uses it on the... Was already moving toward the command center. Keep this channel open, Chancellor. If you truly want peace, help us prevent a genocide. The Alliance Command Center was a marvel of integrated technology. Human systems worked seamlessly with processing cores, sensor networks, and in tactical displays. In 6 months, humanity had not only learned to use alien technology, but had found ways to improve it by combining it with their own innovations. Fleet status demanded as she entered the center. Third Fleet is still 6 hours from the system, reported Admiral. Council forces will arrive in 4 hours. The planet killer will be in range to fire in 5. What about local defenses? They have 3 system defense ships and a handful of converted miners. Against a full Council battle fleet, they won't last 10 minutes. Studied the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. They housed over 2 billion beings. If the Council used their planet killer weapon, it would be the largest single act of genocide in galactic history. Get me a connection to Admiral. The communications officer looked up in surprise. Ma'am, the Council fleet isn't responding to any transmissions. Then patch me through the Chancellor's connection. Can you reach? The leader's image reappeared on the main screen. I'll try, but he's operating under emergency protocols. He believes he has the authority to act independently. Within minutes, the stern visage of Supreme Admiral filled the display. His species, were natural predators, and even through the translator, his voice carried the menace of a being evolved for warfare. Human leader, you will order your ships to withdraw from the system immediately, or we will demonstrate the price of defying the Council. Admiral, you're talking about murdering 2 billion innocent civilians. How does that serve the Council's stated mission of bringing order to the galaxy? Order requires discipline. Discipline requires consequences. Your rebellion ends today. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in tense silence. Turned to the tactical display, studying the positions of ships across multiple star systems. Humanity had learned much in 6 months, but they had never faced anything like a Council planet killer. Options, she asked her staff. We could try to evacuate suggested Admiral, but with 2 billion inhabitants and only civilian transport. It would take months, finished, and won't give us that time. Captain, the Alliance's chief tactical officer, highlighted a section of the display. Ma'am, there might be another option. We've been analyzing captured Council technology, including data on their planet killer weapons. They're devastating, but they have a vulnerability. Explain. The weapons require a massive energy buildup before firing. During that time, they're vulnerable to quantum interference, if we could get close enough. How close? Within the weapon's own blast radius, it would be a suicide mission. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. Found herself facing the kind of decision that would define not just humanity's future, but the future of every species in the galaxy. How long would it take to modify one of our ships for the mission? 6 hours, maybe 7 if we're lucky. Then we don't have time. Turn to the communications station. Get me a direct line to captain aboard the Defiant. The Defiant was humanity's first captured Council battleship, taken during the initial engagement in the Sol system. Captain and her crew had been working for months to fully integrate human technology with the alien systems. His face appeared on screen, her expression grim as she absorbed the tactical situation. "I understand the mission, Secretary General. My crew and I volunteer." "Sarah, you know what this means. We all knew the risks when we joined the Alliance. Ma'am, if I may, this is exactly why we fight, to prevent monsters like from treating entire worlds as expendable." Felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. In the old world, this decision would have been made by committees, analyzed by experts, debated by politicians. But there was no time for the luxury of careful deliberation. "Approved, Godspeed, Captain." As the Defiant began its desperate journey toward the system, opened the channel to Chancellor again. "Chancellor, I need you to help me understand something. Your people built the Council to prevent wars, but now your admiral is about to commit genocide. How do you justify that?" His image wavered, whether from transmission interference or emotion, couldn't tell. "I can't. That's why I'm talking to you instead of supporting his mission." "Then help us stop him." "How? I'm here on the capital world, thousands of light years away." "You still have loyal ships, loyal commanders. Are any of them close enough to the system to intervene?" The Chancellor paused, consulting data streams couldn't see. "Perhaps. Commander commands a patrol squadron 2 systems away. She's always been loyal to the Council's original ideals." "Can you reach her?" "Yes, but asking her to attack's fleet would be asking her to commit treason." "Is it treason to prevent genocide?" For long moments, remained silent. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that transcended translation. "You're asking me to destroy everything I've spent my life building." "No," replied gently. "I'm asking you to save it. The Council's original mission was to bring peace to the galaxy. That's not what it's doing today." The tactical display updated as new contacts appeared in the system. 3 ships, moving to intercept Admiral's fleet. Commander Squadron had answered their Chancellor's call. "This is Commander to Admiral," came the transmission. "By direct order of Chancellor, you are commanded to stand down and return to base." His response was predictably furious. "Commander, you are interfering with a lawful military operation. Withdraw immediately or face court-martial." "I serve the Council's ideals, Admiral, not its corruption." What followed was the first battle between Council forces in over 1,000 years. 3 ships against battle fleet was hardly a fair fight, but they succeeded in their real mission, buying time for the Defiant to arrive. Captain's ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel just as Planet Killer began its charging sequence. The massive weapon, mounted on a ship the size of a small moon, glowed with the energies that could crack a world in half. "Defiant to all ships," his voice carried across the tactical displays in the Alliance Command Center. "We're beginning our attack run. It's been an honor serving with you all." The human ship accelerated toward the Planet Killer, its modified engines pushing it far beyond safe operational parameters. Council ships moved to intercept, but the Defiant had been designed for exactly this kind of mission. It slipped through the enemy formation like water through a net. "Quantum interference charges armed," reported its tactical officer. 30 seconds to optimal deployment range." On the tactical display, watched as the tiny dot representing the Defiant closed with the massive symbol of the Planet Killer. Around them, the battle between its forces and its fleet continued, but everyone knew the real fight was happening in those crucial seconds. "Charges deployed," reported. Wait, something's happening." The Planet Killer's energy buildup suddenly destabilized, its massive power core fluctuating wildly as quantum interference cascaded through its systems. But instead of exploding, the ship began to shut down, its weapons powering down in an emergency sequence. "This is Admiral to all ships. Stand down. Repeat, all ships stand down." Blinked in surprise. "What's your status?" "We're alive, Secretary General. The quantum charges worked better than expected. They didn't destroy the Planet Killer, they disabled it completely." Through the command center, a cheer went up from dozens of different species. That was safe, and for the first time since the conflict began, Council forces had been defeated without massive loss of life. But the real victory came hours later, when Chancellor's next transmission arrived. "Secretary General, the Council's emergency session has voted. Admiral has been relieved of command and recalled to face charges. I am authorized to begin formal negotiations for a new galactic compact. Smiled, feeling the tension of months finally beginning to ease. We'll be honored to participate, Chancellor, but this time, let's make sure everyone has a voice in the decision. The galactic order that had existed for two was ending, but something new was beginning. Something based not on domination and hierarchy, but on cooperation and mutual respect. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through superior force, but through superior ideals. And for the first time in their history, the citizens of 1,000 worlds dared to hope that the future might be better than the past. They underestimated humanity, and the Council has lived to regret it. 1 year after first contact, the galaxy had been transformed in ways that even the most optimistic alliance planners had never imagined. The great station at Nexus Point, built in the neutral zone between what had once been Council and Alliance space, stretched across 50 kilometers of interconnected modules, each one representing a different species, a different world, a different vision of what galactic civilization could become. Secretary General walked through the human section of the station, reviewing the final preparations for what historians were already calling the most important gathering in galactic history. Tomorrow, representatives from over 200 species would convene for the Constitutional Convention that would determine the future structure of interstellar civilization. The irony was not lost on her that humanity, the youngest spacefaring species, was hosting the gathering that would reshape a galaxy that had existed long before Earth had even developed complex life. But leadership, she had learned, was not about age or experience. It was about vision and the courage to act on that vision. "The delegation has arrived," announced Commander, now bearing the rank of Admiral in the Alliance fleet. "Chancellor is requesting a private meeting before the formal sessions begin." Nodded, checking the time display on her wrist communicator. "Schedule it for this evening. And Admiral, what's the status of the security arrangements?" "Unprecedented," replied with a slight smile. "We have ships from 47 different species providing protection. The sent their most advanced stealth vessels, the contributed their sensor networks, and then are coordinating a defense grid that makes this place more secure than most planetary capitals." The transformation of former enemies into allies had been one of the most surprising developments of the past year. Species that had fought bitter wars before the Council imposed order were now working together voluntarily, united by the common goal of preventing any single power from dominating the galaxy again. And the quiet mostly. Admiral's trial exposed so much corruption in the old Council hierarchy that even his supporters have distanced themselves. There are still some isolated systems refusing to participate in the convention, but they're outnumbered 100 to 1. Walked to the observation deck, looking out at the incredible variety of ships surrounding the station. Sleek Council vessels floated alongside crude but effective Alliance conversions, organic bioships shared space with geometric and constructs, and humanity's own ships, still showing the evolutionary marks of their rapid technological advancement. The past year had not been without its challenges. The collapse of the Council's central authority had left power vacuums across the galaxy. Some systems had descended into civil war, others had been taken over by criminal organizations, and a few had simply cut themselves off from galactic civilization entirely. But for every world that had fallen into chaos, 3 more had flourished under the Alliance's protection. Species that had been technological development for centuries were making breakthrough discoveries. Ancient conflicts were being resolved through diplomacy rather than force. Trade was flowing more freely than it had in. The human contribution to this transformation had been their gift for seeing connections that others missed, for finding solutions that transcended traditional thinking. Where other species saw binary choices between order and chaos, humans saw a spectrum of possibilities. Where others accepted that some problems were unsolvable, humans asked what assumptions needed to be challenged. That evening, met with Chancellor in the diplomatic quarters of the human section. The leader looked older than she had a year ago, the crystalline structure of her skin showing stress fractures that spoke of enormous pressures endured. "Secretary General," began, "I wanted to speak with you privately before the convention begins. What we are attempting tomorrow, it has never been done before. Building a democratic galactic government. Building any galactic government through consensus rather than conquest." The Chancellor moved to the viewport, her 4 arms gesturing at the assembled fleet. Every previous attempt to unite the galaxy has been through force. The Council succeeded for two because we were stronger than anyone else, but your alliance, you've done something different. Joined her at the window, we gave people a choice. Choice, repeated. Such a simple concept, yet it has revolutionized everything. Do you know what my advisors told me when your species first rejected our offer? I can imagine. They said you were anarchists, that you would bring chaos to the galaxy, that your democratic ideals would lead to endless war as every species pursued its own interests. The Chancellor's secondary arms moved in what had learned was a gesture of ironic amusement. Instead, you brought the most stable peace the galaxy has seen in. Because people fight harder for systems they choose than for systems imposed on them. Yes, but there's more than that. Turn to face directly. Your species has a gift for making others believe that improvement is possible. Every other species I know accepts their current situation as permanent, as the natural order. Humans alone seem to believe that anything can be made better. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the station's command center. Admiral's face appeared on the holographic display, her expression grim. Ma'am, we have a problem. Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching from the galactic rim. Configuration is unknown, but the energy signature suggests technology beyond anything we've encountered. Felt ice form in her stomach. How massive? Over 1,000 ships, ma'am. They'll reach Nexus Point in approximately 18 hours. Skin shifted to a darker crystalline pattern that recognized as the expression of deep concern. That could only be the Devourers. The what? An ancient enemy from before the Council's time. They were driven beyond the galactic rim over 3,000 years ago. We thought they were extinct. The next few hours passed in a blur of emergency preparations. The Constitutional Convention was postponed as delegates scrambled to coordinate a defense against an enemy that none of the current generation had ever faced. The historical records painted a terrifying picture of a species that consumed entire worlds, not for resources, but for the simple joy of destruction. In the Alliance Command Center, found herself facing the greatest crisis since the conflict with the Council began. The assembled fleet at Nexus Point was impressive, but it had been designed for ceremony and protection, not for major battle against an unknown enemy. What do we know about their capabilities? She asked the mixed staff of humans and other species working together at the tactical displays. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the Alliance's chief, pulled up holographic displays showing ancient battle records. According to Council archives, the Devourers use some form of matter conversion technology. They can literally consume ships, space stations, even planets, and convert the mass into more ships for their fleet. How were they stopped before? They weren't stopped, answered grimly. They were barely driven back through the combined efforts of every species in the galaxy. The cost was enormous. Entire civilizations were wiped out in the fighting. Admiral studied the tactical projections. Ma'am, even with every ship we can gather, we're outnumbered 10 to 1, and if these Devourers can really convert matter into new ships, then conventional warfare won't work, finished. We need a different approach. It was Captain, the hero of the incident, who provided the insight that would change everything. Ma'am, what if we're approaching this wrong? Everyone's thinking about this as a military problem, but what if it's not? Explain. The Devourers were driven away 3,000 years ago, right? What's changed since then? What brought them back now? Dr. Mitchell consulted her archaeological databases. The timing. It coincides almost exactly with the collapse of the Council's central authority. The Council was maintaining some kind of barrier, realized. The deep space monitoring stations, the long-range patrol fleets. We thought they were for external exploration, but they were actually a containment system. And when the Council collapsed, the containment failed, continued. These Devourers aren't invading, they're coming home. Felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. Dr. Mitchell, what do the archaeological records say about the Devourers' origin? That's unclear. The records from that era are fragmentary, but there are references to a species that was cast out or exiled for crimes against galactic civilization. Not an external enemy, murmured, a galactic civil war. The implications hit the room like a physical force. If the Devourers were originally a galactic species, driven to extremes by exile and isolation, then they weren't facing an alien invasion. They were facing a family reunion gone horribly wrong. "Get me a communication channel to the approaching fleet," ordered. "All frequencies, all protocols." "Ma'am," Admiral protested, "they haven't responded to any of our attempts to communicate." "Because we've been sending military hails and diplomatic protocols. Try something different. Send them a personal message." For the next hour, the communications specialists tried everything they could think of. Mathematical sequences, artistic patterns, musical compositions, even basic pictographs. Nothing worked. It was herself who finally made contact, using the most human approach she could think of. She opened a channel and simply started talking. "Unknown Fleet, this is Secretary General of the Human Alliance. I know you probably don't want to hear from us, and I understand why. You were driven away from your home 3,000 years ago, cast out by the very civilizations that are now trying to build something new. You have every right to be angry, every right to want revenge. But I want you to know that the galaxy has changed. The species that exiled you are mostly gone. The council that maintained your imprisonment has fallen. We're trying to build something different, something based on choice and cooperation instead of dominance and exclusion. I don't know what crimes your ancestors committed or whether the punishment fitted those crimes. But I do know that 3,000 years is long enough for any exile. You are welcome to come home, not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as participants in whatever we build together. Please respond, let us talk." For long minutes there was only silence. Then, when hope was beginning to fade, a response came through the communication systems. The voice was strange, mechanical yet somehow organic, speaking in a language that the universal translators struggled to render into comprehensible terms. "Homeseekers acknowledge word sounds from young species. Long time we drift in cold void, consuming empty matter to survive. Home place calls, but home place shows weapon ships and barrier thoughts." Looked around the command center at the mixed assembly of species, all listening intently to this first communication with an enemy that had haunted galactic nightmares for. "We show weapon ships because we were afraid," she replied honestly. "But weapon ships can become escort ships, barriers can become bridges. What do you need to come home safely? Need assurance that exile punishment ends. Need territory for nest building. Need resources for fleet healing. Many ships damaged from long drift through cold void." It was Chancellor who stepped forward. "Unknown Fleet, this is Chancellor of the, I speak for the old Council authority. The exile declared by our predecessors is hereby officially terminated. You are free to return to galactic civilization." Council voice acknowledged, but young species speaks for many species now. What says Alliance builders about home return? Didn't hesitate. "The Alliance says welcome home. We'll help you find suitable territory, provide resources for repairs, and guarantee your right to participate in the new galactic order we're building. But we need assurance that you won't harm innocent populations or destroy inhabited worlds. Devourer fleets do not consume life worlds without cause. We consume empty matter, dead ships, broken places. Only consume life matter when threatened or starving. Promise of home return reduces threat feelings." What followed was the most complex diplomatic negotiation in galactic history, conducted in real time as a massive fleet hung in space just outside weapons range of the Constitutional Convention. But it worked. Humanity's gift for finding third options, for seeing possibilities that others missed, had turned a potential catastrophe into an opportunity. The Devourers were settled in a cluster of uninhabited systems in the galactic rim, where they could practice their matter conversion technology without threatening inhabited worlds. In exchange, they provided their advanced material sciences to the Alliance, contributing to a technological revolution that accelerated development across hundreds of worlds. When the Constitutional Convention finally convened, it included representatives from the Devourer fleet as well as every other major galactic species. The document they produced over the following weeks established the Galactic Federation, a democratic organization based on principles of self-determination, mutual aid, and peaceful conflict resolution. But the real victory was not in the Constitution itself, but in what its creation represented. For the first time in galactic history, sentient species had chosen to work together not because they were forced to, but because they believed cooperation was better than conflict. 5 years after first contact, Secretary-General stood again on the observation deck of what was now Federation headquarters, watching as ships from across the galaxy arrived for the regular session of the Galactic Assembly. The diversity was staggering, everything from massive devourer conversion ships to tiny single-pilot craft from species that had only recently developed. "Any regrets?" asked Admiral, joining her at the viewport. "About what?" "About rejecting the Council's original offer. Life would have been simpler as a junior member species." Smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought them here, from a single-planet species to the catalyst for galactic democracy in less than a decade. Simpler, maybe, but not better. "The Council thought we were too primitive to understand galactic civilization," observed. "They were wrong about that, just like they were wrong about everything else. We understood perfectly. We just thought it could be improved." And across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds where people now chose their own governments, determined their own futures, and resolved their conflicts through words rather than weapons, the echoes of that simple human belief continued to spread. The galaxy had learned what humanity had always known, that anything could be made better if you had the courage to try. The Council had underestimated humanity, and the galaxy would never be the same.